also makes us realize that we need to kind of grab the moments that we're in and make the best of them. It's like X marks the spot. Here I am. What do I do with it?
Time is the great eraser, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's give the listeners a little overview of the book, but don't give them too much. We don't want them to know exactly what happened. Let's just tease them a little bit.
Okay. I'd like to read the introduction, if you're okay with that.
I'm great with that.
Okay, it reads, in the spring of 1977, a rusty lime green 1950 Chevy slowly crept up the driveway of the Gary and Cheryl Pearson farmstead. An older fellow stepped unsteadily from the car. "Is this David?" he asked. Gary Pearson studied the man, definitely not from around here, a string bean of a man, weak and pallid. The stranger wore clothes that were clean, but he appeared to be uncomfortable inside them. Gary nodded and said not a word. "I'll be right up front with you," the stranger stated. "I just got out of prison." With a cracked voice, as if he had not used it much, he continued, "I was a cellmate of someone who used to live here." Almost 20 years later, in 1996, Gary Pearson began tilling the ground with intentions to build a small playground next to the David Community Church so that the Bible school children would have a place to play. According to the Press News reporter at the time, what Gary found had more to do with the past than with the future. Concrete remnants of building foundations, which lined the main street of David, were unveiled along with cinder residue, more than likely sidewalk material. Typically, historical fiction tells a story set in the past with fictional characters. Although stories vary, the made-up account of ordinary people is interwoven with historical events of the time. Thou shalt not is the exception. The characters existed, the setting was real, and various incidents were authentic. Several of the conversations came directly from court documents as printed in local newspapers from 1898 to 1899. As I read the accounts over and over, I took notes and started reading between the lines. The narrative developed. I'd like to add one comment after that, in that it is historical and it is fiction. But I had to read between the lines, of course, to flesh out the characters. And it's always kind of interesting to me that after persons have read this and they'll come up to me, why hasn't anybody said how much of this is really true or which parts are not true? Because certainly when you flesh out the characters and read between the lines, you think, well, knowing this character as I do from what I've read, I think she would do this or he would do this or they would feel this way. And everyone pretty much just takes the story for the absolute truth.
You know what fiction writers will often say is that their characters won't do anything that the character wouldn't do. So you have created a character that is part reality and part fiction, and yet because you've done your research and because you know this person, and I'm doing air quotes, because you know this person, you probably would not write anything because the character wouldn't let you write anything that the character wouldn't do. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think so. It would be an inconsistency with what they were represented to be.
The characters take on a literal life of their own in fiction writing.
Indeed.
Yeah, they do. I mean, and it's the fiction writers, I'm always absolutely in awe of fiction writers because I've written a little myself, but nothing like what you've experienced. It's hard to talk about in a way that doesn't sound a little bit nuts, if you'll pardon the expression, because the characters take on this life of their own. And I remember when I was trying to write the book that I wrote, they would wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there would be a plot twist, or there would be something major that would happen, and I would have to get up and I would have to write that whatever it was then. You can't wait till you wake up, because then it's gone. Did you experience some similar things?
Yeah. Oh, I've had that experience, and it's almost like, wow, I got to get this down because this is good. Why didn't I think about this during the day?
Bingo. I mean, it's really,
Talk
really
about
interesting.
Characters coming alive. During my research for this, I went to our county jail, and the sheriff at the time, actually he was a retired sheriff, but I met him there, had a real interest in this story. In fact, there's a quote on the back of the book which reads, Stauffer used a true story from rural Iowa in the late 1800s and created an historical novel that will keep you spellbound until the end, when a quiet village exploded with the ultimate evil. Well, he said, Kathy, he said, I'm going to get something on a file cabinet. I'll be back in a little bit. And he came out and he brought me the prison records from the person who committed the crime, which really, it made my eyes go like big, because it was like, this is really real. This is really real. And it lists his violations. And I don't know if these would be violations in today's prison, but talking in bathroom, insolence to officer, disorderly at table, quarreling, fighting, using profanity, standing on clothes in bathroom, visiting with painters in the chapel, loafing, visiting in school office, and then on and on and on with dates and the officer who turned him in. So this particular person was not necessarily likable.
Wow. That gave him a whole different facet, didn't it?
Yes, and gave more in-depth to, even though he presented himself in court records as, he helped paint the church, although he was kind of a nuisance, it said, while he was there. There were records there of the odd jobs that he did in the community, and he had like little quirks, that he didn't necessarily get along with people. And then when you see his prison record, it's this all fits. This all fits. This is who he was.
Well, we have teased our listeners so much with this. I know now that we must tell them where they can find it and how they can get a copy. This is on Amazon, and just in case there is someone who is hearing our interview who's never gone to Amazon to buy anything, I can't imagine that person exists, but I always think that there might be someone out there. All you have to do to get to Amazon is look at your computer screen, and up at the top there's a search feature. All you have to do is type in www.amazon.com. Your computer will take you right to the home page. Now, the home page can be a little overwhelming the first time you go there because there's a lot of stuff. But the thing you're looking for is a big, empty, long, rectangular box. That's where you're going to type in the following information so you can find the book. The title of Kathy's book is Thou Shalt Not by Kathy Stauffer. Kathstauffer. If you type that...
And actually, on the book, Suzanne, it's Kathleen.
Is it Kathleen? Okay. So it's Kathleen, right, Kathy?
Leen.
Leen.
Correct.
Kathleen
There you go.
If you type that in the search feature, click on it, the book will come up. Now, here's the great thing. When you look at the book cover, in the upper right-hand corner of the book cover, you'll see two words. It'll say, Look Inside. If you click on those two words, Look Inside, just put your cursor up there and give it a little click, the book opens electronically. And I always find myself doing electronic quotes because I think of books opening, and this is an electronic book opening. You'll be able to read an excerpt from the book right there, and that will just pull you right into the book, just like what Kathy read us a few minutes ago. Now, Kathy, is there any other place that they could go to besides Amazon to find the book?
I am comfortable with giving my email and putting a person who might be interested in it in the subject line, just the name of the book, Thou Shalt Not. I do snail mail, lots of books through the mail, and so I'm comfortable with that. And my email address would be Kathy with a K, A-T-H-Y, Stauffer, S-T-A-U-F-F-E-R, @hotmail.com.
Now, you also have a blog site. Tell me about the blog site.
That's Kathy Stauffer at blogsite.com is one of the ways to get to it. I just put a little bit about lots of things out there. I think there are probably 300 to 400 little articles in there or narrative pieces about a smattering of things about where I'm coming from, what I believe to be important in life, how I think. There might be a chuckle. There might be a reason for you to stop and think about something. I think that's something that I try to achieve in all of my writing, in that after the reader has read this, what are they taking away from it? What are they still thinking about? That's important to me. That I think there's a message. Everybody has a message they want to tell, but particularly people who are pulled to write, there's a message there that only comes from you, and it's written for a reason, to connect with somebody or not.
I couldn't agree more. And I love the way you describe your own description of your writing, is that it's a mix of suspense, psychological intrigue, and inspiration with a little bit of romance and humor. And I have to say, with this book, real characters and real situations and real tragedy and heartbreak. When our listeners buy a copy of the book and they sit down and they read and they finish, and they either electronically or physically close that back cover for the very last time. This is a very powerful, fascinating, interesting story. Do you just want them to feel like they have been entertained by a really great story? Or is there something else that you would like for them to take away from the book?
That's a big, even vast question. I don't know if I can pull this together, but I'm going to try to. I just think that there's a lot we need to figure out in life. And by either being entertained by a book or learning something new by a book, that we try to understand where different people are coming from and why we experience the things that we do, and why what maybe happened way back then still touches our lives today, in that there is a bigger picture in each one of our lives. And how it all plays out is a journey that's different for each one of us. And it's really kind of fascinating. You know, you can take the bad things and you can take the good things, and you can concentrate on the bad things, or you can concentrate on the good things. Pull it all together and figure out where you're really headed, or what your purpose is, and how you're a part of something really bigger and better maybe than anything that you've imagined.
Kathy, I can't thank you enough for being our guest today on Books on Air. This was such an absolute pleasure. This is such a fascinating book. Thank you so much for sharing the story and the backstory with us today.
I've enjoyed our chat. Thank you, Suzanne.
Now remember, you can find Kathy Stauffer's book on Amazon. The title is Thou Shalt Not by Kathleen, K-A-T-H-L-E-E-N, Stauffer, S-T-A-U-F-F-E-R. I'm Suzanne Harris, and I hope you'll join us for the next Books on Air podcast. Remember, you never know who's going to be here, and you really never know what we're going to talk about. Thank you so much for listening.